My beloved brothers and sisters, we live in a time where the enemy does not always attack us with visible chains or open swords. Instead, he often disguises his traps in the most ordinary things we see, things we touch, and yes, even the things we eat. What enters our body does not only affect our physical health, it can cloud our mind, weaken our spirit, and open the door for darkness to influence us. Food was the very thing used in the Garden of Eden. One fruit, eaten in disobedience, changed the course of humanity. Do you see how Satan works? He will use what seems ordinary to produce extraordinary damage. That is why today I must warn you. There are foods Satan uses to control your life. He disguises them with pleasure, with convenience, and with temptation, but their end is destruction. Let me take you through this journey, and together we will expose these traps. Beloved brothers and sisters, we are living in a world where the schemes of the enemy are often wrapped in things that look ordinary, things that appear harmless, and things that are even celebrated. One of the most powerful strategies he uses is not to strike with a sword, not to destroy with sudden disaster, but to slowly weaken and enslave through the daily habits of our lives. And one of the most effective ways he does this is through what we consume. Food, the very gift of God meant to sustain life, has become one of the devil's silent weapons. From the beginning of time, food was the tool of deception. In the Garden of Eden, humanity lost its place of glory because of one bite, one act of disobedience involving what was eaten. This should open our eyes to see that food is not only physical, it carries spiritual implications. Satan knows that if he can manipulate what goes into your body, he can influence how your mind works, how your emotions respond, and how your spirit fights or grows weak. Take sugar as an example. It looks harmless, it feels pleasant, and it tastes sweet. Children laugh over it, adults crave it, and it is offered at celebrations. Yet the sweetness that touches the tongue soon binds the body. Science shows us that sugar is as addictive as dangerous substances because it rewires the brain, creating dependency. It gives you a temporary high, a momentary spark of energy, but then it crashes, leaving you empty and craving more. This is how sin works. Pleasurable for a moment, but destructive in the end. Many people will say, I cannot go a day without my soft drink, without my dessert, without something sweet. Do you realize what that means? Something other than God has taken control of the body. And the enemy smiles because he has found a way to enslave through appetite. I once met a man who confessed that he could not fast, he could not pray with focus, because his mind was always restless and his energy was unstable. When we look deeper, it was not a demon screaming or some great visible chain, it was sugar. Every day his body demanded more. He thought he was simply satisfying a taste, but in reality, his will was being overpowered. The Bible tells us that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. If that is true, then how can we continue to bring things into the temple that defile and weaken it? Imagine bringing rotten food into a holy sanctuary. Would you ever dare do that? Yet when we continually surrender to destructive consumption, we are doing the same thing to our bodies. Freedom begins when we recognize that what tastes sweet may actually be bitter poison to our destiny. But sugar is not the only weapon. Consider what happens when food is stripped of its life. God provided fruits, grains, vegetables, fresh meats, and pure water. Yet men have taken what was whole and natural and turned it into lifeless products. Processed foods, packed with chemicals and artificial colors, line the shelves of every store. They are convenient, quick, and attractive, but they do not nourish the body as God intended. They bring sicknesses of every kind: obesity, cancer, high blood pressure, and heart disease. The enemy hides behind convenience and tells you, it's easier this way, it saves time, it tastes better. But convenience at the cost of life is nothing but destruction wrapped in shiny packaging. I remember a woman who was constantly ill. She was a believer who prayed fervently, yet her body was always in pain, her energy always drained. When I spoke to her, I urged her to change what she was eating. She replaced packaged food with fresh produce, reduced the toxins she was putting into her body, and began to treat eating as stewardship instead of indulgence. Within months, her face began to shine with new strength, her health improved, and her spirit was uplifted. It was not magic, it was wisdom. The devil wanted to shorten her days quietly through processed poison, but when she chose God's provision, she regained life. Do you see how subtle the enemy is? He does not always attack openly. He attacks by making you believe that artificial is better than natural. Yet beyond sugar and processed foods, there is another trap: overeating. It is not only about what you eat, but about how much. Esau in the Old Testament is a painful example. He sold his birthright for one bowl of stew. Imagine that, destiny exchanged for appetite. And that is what still happens today. Many people surrender their future, their calling, their health, because they cannot master their hunger. They allow their stomach to dictate, and in doing so, they weaken their spirit. A man or woman who cannot say no to a second plate often struggles to say no to temptation in other areas. Gluttony dulls the spirit and chains the will. I have seen people weep at the altar, asking God for deliverance, yet their chains were in their daily habits. They prayed for freedom, but at home they were slaves to food. What many fail to see is that lack of discipline in the body often leads to lack of discipline in the soul. When you rise above the cravings of your flesh, your spirit gains power to resist temptation in every form. Self-control in eating is not about dieting, it is about spiritual warfare. It is saying, my stomach is not my master, God is my master. There are also hidden dangers in stimulants. Many believe they cannot function without endless cups of coffee, without strong energy drinks, without pills to keep them awake. But what is happening? The body is being forced to run faster than it was designed to. Anxiety increases, sleep is stolen, and the heart grows weary. The devil enjoys keeping people on this roller coaster of highs and lows. He convinces them that they cannot live without these artificial boosts, and when the effects fade, their bodies collapse into exhaustion. I have seen young people destroy their health because they believed more energy drinks would give them more life. But life does not come from a can. It comes from God. The joy of the Lord is our strength. The peace of God restores our soul. The Spirit of God gives endurance far beyond what stimulants can offer. And then there is the idol of fast food. In this hurried world, speed is worshipped. People claim they have no time to cook, no time to prepare. So they run to fast food, cheap, quick, and deadly. Families no longer sit together at the table. Parents no longer teach their children how to eat with care. Meals have been replaced with wrappers and grease. And the enemy celebrates because not only is the body weakened, but the family bond is destroyed. Yet when we return to the table, when meals are prepared with love, something holy happens. Gratitude rises, unity is strengthened, and health is restored. My friends, Satan does not always roar. Sometimes he whispers. Sometimes he does not come with chains, but with cravings. He hides in sugar, in processed products, in overeating, in stimulants, and in the fast food culture. His goal is not just to make you sick, but to distract you, to weaken your will, to keep you bound. But you were not created for bondage, you were created for freedom. When you begin to discipline your appetite, when you choose wisely what enters your body, when you honor your body as God's temple, you break His power. Freedom is not only about casting out demons or breaking addictions to drugs or alcohol. It is also about taking authority over daily choices. It is about saying, I will not let my appetite control me. I will let the Spirit of God control me. My dear brothers and sisters, when we look at the life we are living today, we often think that the great battles are fought only in the open, with visible enemies and obvious challenges. But in reality, many of the greatest battles are fought in secret, in the quiet corners of our lives, in the places where nobody is watching. One of the most subtle yet dangerous battlefields is in the food we eat. It is not simply about nutrition or taste. What you put into your body does not just affect your health, it affects your mind, your emotions, and your spirit. That is why the enemy is so clever. He does not always come to you with horns and fire. He comes with something as sweet and ordinary as a plate of food. In Eden, it was not a sword that destroyed humanity's relationship with God. It was a fruit. From the very beginning, Satan has used food as a tool of deception, and he is still using it today to control, enslave, and destroy countless lives. Let us think about sugar. It appears so innocent, doesn't it? It sparkles, it sweetens, it comforts. When you are tired, it promises you quick energy. When you are sad, it promises comfort. But what looks harmless at first becomes a prison later. Studies show us that sugar is addictive, creating cravings and dependencies in the brain just like drugs do. At first you feel uplifted, but then comes the crash. And what do you do after the crash? You run back for more. It is a cycle of enslavement. Satan loves this because it mirrors the very pattern of sin. Sin always begins sweet, always promises relief, always offers pleasure, but it never tells you about the bitterness that follows. And just as people cannot stop running to sugar, so they cannot stop running to sin once they are trapped. I once spoke with a young man who admitted that he could not focus in prayer, could not fast for even half a day, and could not maintain his energy. His body was constantly demanding sweets. He did not realize that what seemed small had become a chain around his neck. When he began to discipline himself, when he removed the sugar that had enslaved him, suddenly his mind became clearer, his prayers became stronger, and his spirit felt free. This is what we must understand. These foods are not just about health, they are about freedom. If your stomach controls you, then how can you expect your spirit to lead you? If your cravings dictate your actions, then how can you truly be free to follow the Spirit of God? But sugar is not alone in this battle. Think about the processed foods that fill the markets and shelves. God created food with life inside it. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, grains, nuts, fish. These carry the breath of God's design. But what has man done? He has stripped them of their nutrients, injected them with chemicals, painted them with artificial colors, and preserved them with toxins so they can sit on shelves for months. The world calls it convenience, but brothers and sisters, convenience often hides destruction. These foods fill the stomach but rob the body. They keep you alive but drain your strength. They quiet your hunger but plant seeds of sickness that bloom years later. I once met a woman who lived her whole life on fast meals, frozen packages, and instant food. She thought it saved her time, but slowly her body began to fail. She suffered from chronic pain, endless fatigue, and emotional heaviness. She thought she was cursed. She thought demons were attacking her. But the truth was hidden in her daily meals. When she replaced what was dead with what was living, her energy returned, her mind grew sharper, and even her faith became more vibrant. Satan wanted to destroy her not with a storm, but with a fork. That is how he works, quietly, gradually, until you are too weak to resist. And then we must face the reality of overeating. You may think overeating is just a small weakness, but remember the story of Esau. He traded his birthright, his destiny, for one bowl of stew. Imagine that, all the promises of God for his life given away because of hunger. And this is what happens every day. People sacrifice their health, their calling, even their spiritual power because they cannot say no to their appetite. When the stomach rules, the spirit is silenced. If you cannot control what enters your mouth, how can you expect to control what enters your mind or heart? This is why gluttony is such a powerful weapon of the enemy. It dulls your spirit, makes you sluggish, and fills you with regret. I have prayed for people who begged for deliverance from depression, anxiety, and oppression. But when I asked them about their daily lives, it was not only spirits they were fighting, it was their plates. Their chains were not just spiritual, they were physical. They could not resist food, and because of that, they could not resist temptation. There is a deep connection between discipline of the body and discipline of the spirit. If you can say no to your stomach, you will find it easier to say no to sin. Self-control in eating is not just about diet, it is about spiritual strength. It is about declaring, my stomach is not my master, my cravings are not my God, God alone is my master. There is also a hidden danger in stimulants. Many cannot function without coffee after coffee, energy drink after energy drink, or pills to keep them awake. At first, these may seem like helpers, but soon they become crutches, and finally they become chains. These stimulants force the body beyond its God-given rhythm. They keep you in a cycle of artificial highs and painful crashes. They bring anxiety, sleeplessness, and confusion. The enemy loves this because a restless, anxious person is easy to control. When you are tired, irritable, and dependent on artificial strength, how can you fully hear the gentle voice of God? I once counseled a young student who was drinking 4 energy drinks a day just to keep up with his studies. He was proud at first, saying he could work longer than anyone else. But soon his body began to fail, his emotions collapsed, and he had to be hospitalized. He thought the drinks gave him life, but they were taking his life away. Our true strength comes not from stimulants, but from the joy of the Lord, from His peace, from His Spirit. Artificial stimulants can only give you a shadow of strength, but the Spirit of God gives you strength that does not fade. Finally, we cannot ignore the idol of fast food. We live in a generation that worships speed. People say they do not have time to cook, do not have time to prepare, and so they run to fast food. It is quick, it is cheap, it is everywhere. But what is the cost? Families no longer gather at the table. Parents no longer pass on wisdom during meals. Children grow up on fries and soda instead of fresh bread and fruit. And behind this hurried culture is the enemy, laughing because we are too busy to care for the temple God gave us. Fast food fills the belly, but empties the body. It provides speed, but steals years from your life. I have seen families transformed when they decided to return to the table, to prepare food with care, to eat together with gratitude. Something holy happens when you eat with discipline, when you slow down and honor the gift of food. It is not just nutrition, it is worship. It is declaring, I will not sacrifice my health on the altar of convenience. I will not allow the enemy to destroy me with speed. And my beloved, Satan is not always loud. Sometimes he comes as a whisper, sometimes as a craving, sometimes as a convenience. He hides in sugar, in processed food, in overeating, in stimulants, and in fast food. His goal is not only to weaken your body, but to enslave your will and distract your spirit. But you are not called to be a slave. You are called to freedom. When you learn to discipline your appetite, when you honor your body as the temple of God, you are breaking chains the enemy has used for generations. This is more than health. It is victory. This is more than diet. It is destiny. This is more than food. It is spiritual warfare. Rise up and take authority. Your plate is a battlefield, and every choice you make can either feed the enemy's plan or fuel God's purpose in your life. My beloved brothers and sisters, there are many ways the enemy tries to gain control over our lives. Sometimes it is through obvious temptations, sometimes through fear and discouragement, and sometimes through subtle compromises that seem harmless at first, but eventually weaken us. One of the most overlooked battlegrounds is found in the very thing we do every day without much thought: the food we eat. Food was designed by God to sustain us, to strengthen us, and to give us joy. But Satan, the deceiver, has taken what was meant for blessing and twisted it into a weapon for destruction. From the beginning of creation, food was at the center of temptation. It was with one bite that humanity fell in the Garden of Eden. This shows us that food is not just about satisfying hunger. It is deeply spiritual. The enemy knows that what you put in your body can affect your ability to pray, your clarity of mind, your strength to serve, and your freedom to live in victory. That is why we must be vigilant and discerning, for what seems ordinary may become a doorway for bondage. Take, for example, the sweetness of sugar. It comes in cakes, desserts, soft drinks, and candies. It is everywhere, and it gives pleasure so quickly. But the sweetness is a disguise. Behind it is slavery. Sugar creates dependency in the body, manipulating the brain and emotions in such a way that a person begins to crave more and more. Just as sin promises delight and leaves behind emptiness, sugar promises energy but soon leaves the body drained and desperate for another dose. How many times have we heard people say, I cannot start my day without something sweet? Or, I cannot focus unless I have my sugar. That is not freedom. That is a chain. And Satan rejoices when men and women bow to cravings rather than live in self-control. I once prayed with a man who confessed that he could not fast, even for a short time, because his body would tremble, his head would ache, and his mind would feel clouded. He thought it was simply weakness, but it was addiction. Sugar had enslaved him. When he began to discipline his body, when he cut off the excess and replaced it with healthier choices, his strength returned, his prayers became deeper, and his focus sharpened. This shows us that what you eat is not just about taste. It is about whether you are free or bound. Scripture teaches us that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Would you allow anything unclean into the temple of God? Then why would we continually pour poison into our bodies and call it normal? The same is true of processed foods. God in His wisdom created the earth with abundance, fresh fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, grains, and pure meats. These are full of life and nutrients. But man, in his pursuit of convenience and profit, has stripped food of its natural goodness, replaced it with chemicals, and sold it back to us as if it were better. We eat what looks appealing, but what goes in does not strengthen the body, it weakens it. These foods are linked to countless diseases. Families today are not dying from lack of food, but from the wrong kind of food. And the enemy hides behind this, because he knows that if he can weaken the body, he can weaken the spirit's ability to endure. I remember a woman who came to me constantly tired, depressed, and overwhelmed with illness. She prayed, she fasted, she believed, yet her health was always failing. When she was encouraged to change what she ate, to leave behind the processed meals and return to natural, life-giving food, a transformation took place. Slowly her energy returned, her body grew stronger, and even her faith was renewed. Satan had been attacking her silently, not through storms or accidents, but through daily habits at the dinner table. This is how subtle he is. He does not always come with a shout. Sometimes he comes with a flavor. But it is not only about what we eat. It is also about how much we eat. Overeating has become a silent destroyer. Many no longer eat to live. They live to eat. Appetite has become a master. Think of Esau, who gave up his birthright for one bowl of stew. He exchanged destiny for appetite. When the stomach is in control, the spirit becomes weak. A man who cannot say no to a second plate will struggle to say no when sin knocks at his door. A woman who cannot discipline her appetite may also find it hard to discipline her thoughts and emotions. Gluttony is not only a physical problem, it is a spiritual one. It dulls your hearing of God's voice, it makes you sluggish in prayer, and it fills your heart with guilt. I have seen people cry out for deliverance from chains, unaware that their chains were made of food. They prayed for freedom from oppression, but did not realize they were being controlled by appetite. When they began to practice self-control in eating, they found new strength to resist temptation in other areas of life. Do not underestimate the power of appetite. To bring your body under discipline is to bring your spirit into greater freedom. There is also the danger of stimulants, things people take to feel awake, alert, and energized. Coffee, energy drinks, pills, and other artificial stimulants promise strength, but in reality they steal it. They give a short burst of energy but leave the body exhausted, the mind restless, and the spirit anxious. Satan uses these highs and lows to keep people in cycles of dependency. The more tired they feel, the more they consume, and the more they consume, the weaker they become. True strength does not come from a can or a pill. True strength comes from the joy of the Lord, from His peace, and from a body cared for as God intended. I once knew a student who thought energy drinks were the key to success. He drank them day and night to study longer, to stay awake, and to work harder. But his body began to break down. His heart raced, his mind became anxious, and eventually he collapsed. What he thought was giving him life was actually draining the life out of him. This is the deception of the enemy, to make what destroys you look like what sustains you. And finally, there is the culture of fast food and convenience. We live in a world that worships speed. People are too busy to cook, too busy to sit at the table, too busy to honor the gift of food. And so they run to fast food, cheap, greasy, quick, and destructive. But what do they lose? Families no longer eat together. Children grow up without the habit of gratitude, and health is sacrificed for convenience. Satan loves this. He wants you too busy to care, too distracted to notice, and too hurried to resist. But when families return to the table, when they prepare food with love and sit together in gratitude, there is healing not only in the body but in the spirit. A family meal becomes an altar of unity, where hearts are knit together and health is restored. My dear friends, the enemy does not always attack with loud threats. Sometimes he comes softly, with cravings, with habits that seem harmless. But do not be deceived. Sugar, processed foods, overeating, stimulants, and fast food are not just diet choices, they are spiritual battles. Every time you choose, you are deciding whether to walk in freedom or in bondage. You are deciding whether your body will be the temple of God or a playground for the enemy. Freedom begins when you take back control, when you discipline your appetite, and when you honor the gift of your body. The Spirit of God wants to fill you with strength, clarity, and peace, but you must choose to close the doors the enemy uses. Rise up and take authority even in the smallest choices, because what you eat is not just about survival, it is about destiny. Beloved, the devil does not always roar like a lion. Sometimes he creeps like a snake, slipping into your daily habits, hiding in the food you eat. But today, truth has exposed him. Sugar, processed foods, overeating, artificial stimulants, and fast food. These are not just diet choices, they are spiritual battlegrounds. Let us rise with wisdom. Let us treat our bodies as sacred vessels. Let us eat with discipline, live with balance, and glorify God in every choice. Remember, freedom is not only breaking chains of sin, but also breaking chains of appetite. When the stomach is in submission, the spirit is free to soar.